Good evening and Merry Christmas. While my story is not necessarily spooky, I do believe it would be approved by Mr. Poe. I bring you The Steadfast Tin Soldier. There were once 25 tin soldiers. They were all brothers, born of the same old tin spoon. They shouldered their muskets and looked straight ahead of them, splendid in their uniforms, all red and blue. The very first thing in the world that they heard was tin soldiers. A small boy shouted it and clapped his hands as the lid was lifted off their box on Christmas morning. He immediately set them up on the table. All the soldiers looked exactly alike, except one. He looked a little different, as he had been cast last of all. The tin was short, so he had only one leg. But there he stood, as steady on one leg as any of the other soldiers on their two. But just, you see, he'll be the remarkable one. On the table with the soldiers were many other playthings, and one that no eye could miss was a marvelous castle of cardboard. It had little windows through which you could look right inside it, and in front of the castle were miniature trees around a little mirror supposed to represent a lake. The wax swans that swam on its surface were reflected in the mirror. All this was very pretty, but prettiest of all was the little lady who stood in the open doorway of the castle. Though she was a paper doll, she wore a dress of the fluffiest gauze. A tiny blue ribbon went over her shoulder for a scarf, and in the middle of it shone a spangle that was as big as her face. The little lady held out both her arms as a ballet dancer does, and one leg was lifted so high behind her that the tin soldier couldn't see it at all, and he supposed she must have only one leg, as he did. That would be a wife for me, he thought. But maybe she's too grand. She lives in a castle. I have only a box, with 24 roommates to share it. That's no place for her. But I must try to make her acquaintance. Still as stiff as when he stood at attention, he lay down on the table behind a snuff box, where he could admire the dainty little dancer, who kept standing on one leg without ever losing her balance. When the evening came, the other tin soldiers were put away in their box, and the people of the house went to bed. Now the toys began to play among themselves at visits and battles and at giving balls. The tin soldiers rattled about in their box, for they wanted to play too, but they could not get the lid open. The nutcracker turned somersaults, and the slate pencil squeaked out jokes on the slate. The toys made such a noise that they woke up the canary bird, who made them a speech, all in verse. The only two who stayed still were the tin soldier and the little dancer. Without ever swerving from the tip of one toe, she held out her arms to him, and the tin soldier was just as steadfast on his one leg. Not once did he take his eyes off her. Then the clock struck 12, and clack, up popped the lid of the snuff box, but there was no snuff in it. No, out bounced a little black bogey, a jack-in-the-box. "Tin soldier," he said, "will you please keep your eyes to yourself?" The tin soldier pretended not to hear. The bogey said, "Just you wait till tomorrow." But when morning came and the children got up, the soldier was set on the window ledge, and whether the bogey did it, or there was a gust of wind, all of a sudden the window flew open and the soldier pitched out headlong from the third floor. He fell at breathtaking speed and landed cap first, with his bayonet buried between the paving stones and his one leg stuck straight in the air. The housemaid and the little boy ran down to look for him, and though they nearly stepped on the tin soldier, they walked right past without seeing him. If the soldier had called, "Here I am," they would surely have found him. But he thought it contemptible to raise an uproar while he was wearing his uniform. Soon it began to rain. The drops fell faster and faster until they came down by the bucketful. As soon as the rain let up, along came two young rapscallions. "Hi, look," one of them said. There's a tin soldier. Let's send him sailing." They made a boat out of newspaper, put the tin soldier in the middle of it, and away he went down the gutter with the two young rapscallions running beside him and clapping their hands. High heavens, how the waves splashed, and how fast the water ran down the gutter. Don't forget that it had just been raining by the bucketful. The paper boat pitched and tossed, and sometimes it whirled about so rapidly that it made the soldier's head spin. But he stood as steady as ever, never once flinching. He kept his eyes front and carried his gun shoulder high. Suddenly, the boat rushed under a long plank where the gutter was boarded over. It was as dark as the soldier's own box. "Where can I be going?" the soldier wondered. "This must be that black bogey's revenge. Ah, if I only had the little lady with me, it could be twice as dark here for all that I would care." Out popped a great water rat who lived under the gutter plank. "Have you a passport?" said the rat. "Hand it over." The soldier kept quiet and held his musket tighter. On rushed the boat, and the rat came right after it, gnashing his teeth as he called to the sticks and straws. "Hold him! Stop him! He didn't pay his toll. He hasn't shown his passport." But the current ran stronger and stronger. The soldier could see daylight ahead where the board ended, but he also heard a roar that would frighten the bravest of us. Hold on! Right at the end of that gutter plank, the water poured into the great canal. It was as dangerous to him as a waterfall would be to us. He was so near it that he could not possibly stop. The boat plunged into the whirlpool. How the poor tin soldier stood as staunch as he could, and no one can say that he so much as blinked an eye. Thrice and again the boat spun around, it filled to the top and was bound to sink. The water was up to his neck, and still the boat went down deeper, 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 and the paper got soft and limp. Then the water rushed over his head. He thought of the pretty little dancer, whom he'd never see again, and in his ears rang an old, old song. "Farewell, farewell, O warrior brave, nobody can from death thee save." And now the paper boat broke beneath him, and the soldier sank right through, and just at that moment he was swallowed by a most enormous fish. My, how dark it was inside that fish! It was darker than under the gutter plank, and it was so cramped. But the tin soldier still was staunch. He lay there, full length, soldier fashion, with musket to shoulder. Then the fish flopped and floundered in a most unaccountable way. Finally, it was perfectly still, and after a while, something struck through him like a flash of lightning. The tin soldier saw daylight again, and he heard a voice say, "The tin soldier!" The fish had been caught, carried to market, bought, and brought to a kitchen where the cook cut him open with her big knife. She picked the soldier up bodily between her two fingers and carried him off upstairs. Everyone wanted to see this remarkable traveler who had traveled about in a fish's stomach, but the tin soldier took no pride in it. They put him on the table, and lo and behold, what curious things can happen in this world. There he was, back in the same room as before. He saw the same children. The same toys were on the table. And there was the same fine castle with the pretty little dancer. She still balanced on one leg, with the other raised high. She, too, was steadfast. That touched the soldier so deeply that he would have cried 10 tears. Only soldiers never cry. He looked at her, and she looked at him, and never a word was said. Just as things were going so nicely for them, one of the little boys snatched up the tin soldier and threw him into the stove. He did it for no reason at all. That black bogey in the snuff box must have put him up to it. The tin soldier stood there, dressed in flames. He felt a terrible heat, but whether it came from the flames or from his love, he didn't know. He'd lost his splendid colors, maybe from his hard journey, maybe from grief. Nobody can say. He looked at the little lady, and she looked at him, and he felt himself melting, but still he stood steadfast, with his musket held trim on his shoulder. Then the door blew open. A puff of wind struck the dancer. She flew like a sylph straight into the fire with the soldier, blazed up in a flash, and was gone. The tin soldier melted, all in a lump. The next day, when a servant took up the ashes, she found him in the shape of a little tin heart. But the pretty dancer, nothing was left, except her spangle, and it was burned as black as a coal. This is Jason Markiewitz. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening.
Shadow, a Parable by Edgar Allan Poe. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow, Psalm of David. Ye who read are still among the living, but I who write shall have long since gone my way into the region of shadows. For indeed strange things shall happen, and secret things be known, and many centuries shall pass away ere these memorials be seen of men. And when seen, there will be some to disbelieve, and some to doubt, and yet a few who will find much to ponder upon in the characters here graven with a stylus of iron. The year had been a year of terror, and of feelings more intense than terror, for which there is no name upon the earth. For many prodigies and signs have taken place, and far and wide, over sea and land, the black wings of the pestilence were spread abroad. To those, nevertheless, cunning in the stars, it was not unknown that the heavens wore an aspect of ill. And to me, the Greek oinos, among others, it was evident that now had arrived the alternation of that 794th year, when at the entrance of Aries, the planet Jupiter is conjoined with the red ring of the terrible Saturnus. The peculiar spirit of the skies, if I mistake not greatly, made itself manifest, not only in the physical orb of the earth, but in the souls, imaginations, and meditations of mankind. Over some flasks of red Chian wine, within the walls of a noble hall, in a dim city called Ptolemais, we sat, at night, a company of 7. And into our chamber there was no entrance save by a lofty door of brass. And the door was fashioned by the artisan Coronos, and being of rare workmanship, was fastened from within. Black draperies, likewise, in the gloomy room, shut out from our view the moon, the lurid stars, and the peopleless streets. But the boding and the memory of evil, they would not be so excluded. There were things around us, and about of which I can render no distinct account, things material and spiritual. Heaviness in the atmosphere, a sense of suffocation, anxiety, and above all, that terrible state of existence which the nervous experience when the senses are keenly living and awake, and meanwhile the powers of thought lie dormant. A dead weight hung upon us. It hung upon our limbs, upon the household furniture, upon the goblets from which we drank, and all things were depressed and borne down thereby. All things save only the flames of the 7 iron lamps which illuminated our revel. Uprearing themselves in tall, slender lines of light, they thus remained burning, all pallid and motionless. And in the mirror which their lustre formed upon the round table of ebony at which we sat, each of us there assembled beheld the power of his own countenance, and the unquiet glare in the downcast eyes of his companions. Yet we laughed and were merry in our proper way, which was hysterical, and sang the songs of Anacreon, which are madness, and drank deeply, although the purple wine reminded us of blood. For there was yet another tenant of our chamber in the person of young Zoilus. Dead, at full length he lay enshrouded, the genius and the demon of the scene. Alas, he bore no portion in our mirth, save that his countenance, distorted with the plague, and his eyes, in which death had but half extinguished the fire of the pestilence, seemed to take such interest in our merriment as the dead may haply take in the merriment of those who are about to die. But although I, Oinos, felt that the eyes of the departed were upon me, still I forced myself not to perceive the bitterness of their expression, and gazing down steadily into the depths of the ebony mirror, sang with a loud and sonorous voice the songs of the son of Teos. But gradually my songs, they ceased, and their echoes, rolling afar off among the sable draperies of the chamber, became weak and undistinguishable, and so faded away. And lo, from among those sable draperies, where the sounds of the song departed, there came forth a dark and undefined shadow, a shadow such as the moon, when low in heaven, might fashion from the figure of a man. But it was the shadow neither of man nor of God, nor of any familiar thing, and quivering among the draperies of the room, it at length rested in full view upon the surface of the door of brass. But the shadow was vague and formless and indefinite, and was shadow neither of man nor God, nor neither God of Greece nor God of Chaldea, nor any Egyptian god. And the shadow rested upon the brazen doorway, and under the arch of the entablature of the door, and moved not, nor spoke any word, but there became stationary and remained. And the door whereupon the shadow rested was, if I remember aright, there against the feet of the young Zoilus enshrouded. But we, the seven, there assembled, having seen the shadow, as it came out from among the draperies, dared not steadily behold it, but cast down our eyes and gazed continually into the depths of the mirror of ebony. And at length I, Oinos, speaking some low words, demanded of the shadow its dwelling and its appellation. And the shadow answered, I am Shadow, and my dwelling is near the catacombs of Ptolemaeus, and hard by those dim plains of Elysium, which border upon the foul Charonian channel. And then did we, the seven, start from our seats in horror, and stand trembling and shuddering and aghast, for the tones and the voice of the shadow were not the tones of any one being, but the multitude of beings, and varying in their cadences from syllable to syllable, fell duskily upon our ears in the well-remembered and familiar accents of many thousand departed friends.
Chapter 1. The Mirror. 1826. Death is not absolute. There is life beyond the black veil if you choose to listen for it, look for it. There are people for whom this veil is thinner than it is for others, and for the chosen few, it is lifted. The realm of the living and the realm of the yet to come blur. Reality blurs. The sane mind and all that is madness blurs. I ran my hand over the mercury-dabbled mirror in the cellar bathroom. The bruises of the looking-glass cast their own blemishes over my reflection, like lichen banqueting the flesh of a tree. There was something about the quaintness of the space I was drawn to. There was something to be said about the way the black wallpaper, with its tiny daisies, the size of scarabaeus beetles, arched over me, culminating in an ebony lacquered ceiling. And there was something about the old mirror that enticed me to come to the cellar, night after night. Everything here felt more intimate, felt more real. The daisies on the wallpaper smelled more vibrant than the real ones growing outside my family's ancestral home, more special than the collection of rare flowers from all over the world, including the East Indies, Africa, and England, that Athena kept in the solarium. Their habitat was dark and damp, the gloominess of all subterranean homes. Only a small crawl-space window let natural light filter in, but it was the moonlight these flowers of the night bent toward with a yearning. We were one of the few families in Richmond, Virginia that could afford such luxuries as an indoor lavatory, and having a bathroom in our cellar was the dull fortune on parade. More so that this bathroom had been abandoned. I was the only one who used it now. I was the only one that came down here after the fire of 1821. The fire had ripped through the family vault, laying to ash the remains of my ancestors and killing 20 servants, along with my grandmother's twin brother. Others would smell smoke down here in the dank cellar bathroom, boarded up and forgotten about after all that death, but not me. I could only smell the daisies. This place had become a refuge for me, and every night, while everyone in the house slept, I'd sneak down to the cellar and gaze at myself in the antique mirror. My grandmother warned me, since I was a very young child, not to touch the mirror, or I would go as mad as a hatter and have to be carted off to an insane asylum with all the other bad little children who didn't listen to their grandmothers. Going as mad as a hatter was a fair price to pay to look into it. A real mercury mirror sparkles. It sparkles as if the very stars from the heavens are trapped beneath its glass. The mirror twinkled with life every time I gazed upon myself, and touched its winter-like glass with my fingertips. Oh, how I love that antique mirror, with its round top and etched flowers that outshine the daisies on the wall with the luster only cut glass can give. A thin etched line running along the border of the mirror dared me to be as elegant and as thin as it was. I knew, once I would sparkle like the mirror, be composed of 1,000 little stars that would never burn out. I was on my way. It wouldn't be long now. This mirror would never lie to me. In the moon-kissed bathroom, shrouded by dark shadows that tiptoed in from the corners, I looked thinner. The candle burning on the crawl-space ledge cast a halo over my darkened form. I would have looked angelic if it weren't for my dark hair that ran nearly the length of my protruding spine like a shadowy mane, for there was no such thing as dark-haired angels. Yet never had I felt closer to God than when I stood in front of the mirror and gazed at my reflection. The eyes are the gateway to the soul, and it was so easy to peer into mine through my reflection's eyes. Here alone could I glimpse a truth I could seldom perceive or want to understand. My one eye was as dark as the sea at night and as calm. My one eye was the lightest blue I had ever seen, blurring into the sclera of my eye. Only its small, pit-like pupil commanded attention, a thing it always did. I liked my eyes. Others may have felt maddened when they looked at me, unsure where to focus their attention. On my dark eye? On my pale blue eye? On my thin lips? On my raven hair? My eyes were a true reflection of me, more so than the face in the mirror. They exposed my duplicity like two sides of a coin. I was not unlike the Egyptian god Horus, my left eye the morning and my right eye night. But where Horus's eyes gave him power and healing, mine gave me something darker. My brown eye was large and all-encompassing like the innocent eyes of a trusting baby fawn. My blue eye, well, my blue eye was the embodiment of all the evil that dwelled in me. It was there, festering behind the skin and bones of my earthly temple, lurking, waiting for its chance to beckon me to my darkest desires. The only inclination of my perverseness could be glimpsed through my pale blue eye, and seldom did anyone look me dead in that eye, including myself. I positioned my face between the silvery bark flaking from the back of the antique mirror to get a perfect look at myself. I was pleased, very pleased. "You look pretty today," I whispered to my reflection in a voice as frail as my appearance. I jumped back, banging the back of my knees into the toilet. I was grateful the sound was blunted by the heavy cotton material of my pants. I didn't want anyone to know I was in the bathroom again. I leaned in slowly, my face moving back into place between the mirror's scars. I scraped my fingernail over the mirror where my lips turned up. Feeling silly, I ran my hand over my lips. The mirror was just my reflection, after all. I was the real one. It was my face. My lips were the same old, thin lips that looked like a line cutting across my face. They were cold, but they've been cold for a while. It suited them. Lips like mine were never the kind meant for warm embraces. My lips were the kind for listening. Only the tight-lipped made good listeners, and I was always listening. I gazed at my reflection half in awe and half in frustration. Why did the lips in the mirror turn up like that? Like they knew a secret. I watched them press together as if to speak to me. I leaned my ear toward the mirror. I heard a voice. It was soft and fragile, as if seldom used. I couldn't discern what the voice said, just that it spoke. I was not surprised tears welled in my eyes. Despite not understanding the voice, it understood me. I was certain of that, and I was so seldom understood. My nails dug into the blue velvet lining on the back of the mirror as I clutched it with both hands. I had to be gentle now. The bottom edges of the mirror had already cracked and broken off, but I was anxious to make out the words. For us to share something, to share in the secret hidden behind those thin, curved lips. "You can talk to me," I whispered to my reflection in the voice my grandmother used to soothe me when I was a child. "I will listen." My own voice shrieked in my ears, forcing me to grab my head in pain. "I know what you've done." The back of my throat stung as sobs fought free. A whirlwind of emotion tore through me. My head felt like it was on fire as I fought to suppress the memory that clawed at the inside of my skull. I had buried it deep inside of me and threw away the key. But there it came, screaming to the surface, the guilt crushing me as if I was trapped under the mirror's glass. I swooned, leaning on the sink top for support. My dark hair fell over my alabaster skin like strangling vines. The vein in my forehead pulsed with every beat of my heart that sounded in my eardrums like a summons to war. Pressing my lips to the surface of the mirror, a thin sheet of condensation encrusted it, hiding all of my face except my pale blue eye. I couldn't hide from the eye. Couldn't hide from its cloudy gaze. It was too late. It knew what I'd done. I recalled the sound of blood, how it dripped into the old porcelain sink like a metronome.
A Child's Dream of a Star, 1850, by Charles Dickens. There once was a child, and he strolled about a good deal and thought of a number of things. He had a sister who was a child too, and his constant companion. These two used to wonder all day long. They wondered at the beauty of the flowers, they wondered at the height and blueness of the sky, they wondered at the depth of the bright water. They wondered at the goodness and the power of God who made the lovely world. They used to say to one another, sometimes, supposing all the children upon earth were to die, would the flowers and the water and the sky be sorry? They believed they would be sorry, for, said they, the buds are the children of the flowers, and the little playful streams that gambol down the hillsides are the children of the water. And the smallest bright specks playing at hide-and-seek in the sky all night must surely be the children of the stars, and they would all be grieved to see their playmates, the children of men, no more. There was one clear shining star that used to come out in the sky before the rest, near the church spire above the graves. It was larger and more beautiful, they thought, than all the others, and every night they watched for it, standing hand in hand at a window. Whoever saw it first cried out, "I see the star!" And often they cried out both together, knowing so well when it would rise and where. So they grew to be such friends with it that, before lying down in their beds, they always looked out once again to bid it good night, and when they were turning around to sleep, they used to say, "God bless the star." But while she was still very young, oh, very, very young, the sister drooped and came to be so weak that she could no longer stand in the window at night. And then the child looked sadly out by himself, and when he saw the star, turned round and said to the patient pale face on the bed, "I see the star." And then a smile would come upon the face, and a little weak voice used to say, "God bless my brother and the star." And so the time came, all too soon, when the child looked out alone, and when there was no face on the bed, and when there was a little grave among the graves, not there before, and when the star made long rays down towards him as he saw it through his tears. Now, these rays were so bright, and they seemed to make such a shining way from earth to heaven, that when the child went to his solitary bed, he dreamed about the star, and dreamed that, lying where he was, he saw a train of people taken up that sparkling road by angels, and the star, opening, showed him a great world of light, where many more such angels waited to receive them. All these angels who were waiting turned their beaming eyes upon the people who were carried up to the star, and some came out from the long rows in which they stood, and fell upon the people's necks, and kissed them tenderly, and went away with them down avenues of light, and were so happy in their company that, lying in his bed, he wept for joy. But there were many angels who did not go with them, and among them one he knew. The patient face that once had lain upon the bed was glorified and radiant, but his heart found out his sister among all the host. His sister's angel lingered near the entrance of the star, and said to the leader among those who had brought the people thither, "Is my brother come?" And he said, "No." She was turning hopefully away when the child stretched out his arms and cried, "Oh, sister, I am here! Take me!" And then she turned her beaming eyes upon him, and it was night, and the star was shining into the room, making long rays down towards him as he saw it through his tears. From that hour forth the child looked out upon the star as on the home he was to go to when his time should come, and he thought that he did not belong to the earth alone, but to the star too, because of his sister's angel gone before. There was a baby born to be a brother to the child, and while he was so little that he never yet had spoken word, he stretched his tiny form out on his bed and died. Again the child dreamed of the open star, and of the company of angels, and the train of people, and the rows of angels with their beaming eyes all turned upon those people's faces. Said his sister's angel to the leader, "Is my brother come?" And he said, "Not that one, but another." As the child beheld his brother's angel in her arms, he cried, "Oh, sister, I am here! Take me!" And she turned and smiled upon him, and the star was shining. He grew to be a young man, and was busy at his books, when an old servant came to him and said, "Thy mother is no more. I bring her blessing on her darling son." Again at night he saw the star, and all that former company. Said his sister's angel to the leader, "Is my brother come?" And he said, "Thy mother." A mighty cry of joy went forth through all the star, because the mother was reunited to her two children. And he stretched out his arms and cried, "Oh, mother, sister, and brother, I am here! Take me!" And they answered him, "Not yet." And the star was shining. He grew to be a man whose hair was turning gray, and he was sitting in his chair by the fireside, heavy with grief, and with his face bedwed with tears, when the star opened once again. Said his sister's angel to the leader, "Is my brother come?" And he said, "Nay, but his maiden daughter." And the man who had been the child saw his daughter, newly lost to him, a celestial creature among those three, and he said, "My daughter's head is on my sister's bosom, and her arm is round my mother's neck, and at her feet there is the baby of old time, and I can bear the parting from her. God be praised." And the star was shining. Thus the child came to be an old man, and his once smooth face was wrinkled, and his steps were slow and feeble, and his back was bent. And one night, as he lay upon his bed, his children standing round, he cried, as he had cried so long ago, "I see the star!" They whispered one another, "He is dying." And he said, "I am. My age is falling from me like a garment, and I move towards the star as a child. And oh, my Father, now I thank thee that it has so often opened to receive those dear ones who await me." And the star was shining, and it shines upon his grave.
Hi, I'm Steve Boilard. I'm going to read the first chapter of Poe's Last Lament, available at fine booksellers everywhere, particularly on Amazon. It is imagined as a handwritten manuscript that was discovered here in Placerville, California fairly recently in an old Episcopal church. I cannot assume there are many who remember my name, and I suspect fewer still would care to read this chronicle of my misfortune. The treacherous Griswold has succeeded in snuffing out that meager flicker of goodwill that had attended my reputation after publication of The Raven. And yet, as I rapidly approach that tenebrous portal through which all mortals must inevitably pass, I am compelled to give an accounting of the final decade of my most unfortunate life. The pen is, after all, the only tool I have wielded with any modicum of success. It has been my companion and comfort, like an axe to the woodsman or a lacing awl to the leathersmith. I realize now I had been foolish to abandon that worthy aid for the beguiling glitter of the motherlode. I now repentantly return to my jilted mistress and hope that she still responds to my earnest embrace. The Creator has seen fit to grant me almost a half-century upon this indifferent orb. Whether my modest longevity is meant as a blessing or a curse, I cannot say. But without a doubt, its primary effect has been to multiply my disappointments and grief. The untimely death of my beloved Virginia in 1847 visited upon me a cataclysmic loss from which I've never fully recovered. With great discomfiture, I confess to seeking solace from the bottle, as well as companionship of low women who could not hold a candle to dear Sissy. Alas, neither of these vices have attenuated my wretchedness in the slightest. My personal ruin was almost complete. Even the temporary respite of peaceful slumber eluded me, and my waking hours brimmed with anxiety and despair. I struggled even to compose sentences and produced only a half-dozen unremarkable works after Virginia's death. I was at my wit's end. Almost all who truly loved me had by then moved beyond the veil, and I found myself alone and hopelessly in debt to publicans, usurers, and bookmakers. Disastrously, I believed that assembling Griswold to be my one true ally, better that I had befriended a timber rattler. He feigned what I took to be a sympathetic ear, and in response I foolishly bent that ear over the endless drams he procured for me at the Horse Tavern. Somehow that devil convinced me to appoint him my literary executor, a proposal I countenanced while not in my right mind. Indeed, my mind had been abandoned to chronic confusion and uncertainty. My accursed spirit wallowed in unspeakable misery, and the only surcease of my sorrow was afforded by Griswold's infernal whiskey. Partly for this reason, I am unable to give a clear account of my actions during that autumn of 1849. But I acknowledge that by then, drink had gained the better of me. I entirely lost track of my personal circumstances, and when I at length regained a measure of lucidity, I was lying in a bed at Baltimore's Washington College Hospital. The attending physician, Dr. John Moran, explained that the good Snodgrass had brought me there from Gunner's Hall, where he had found me in an unconscious state. And yet it was the ignoble figure of Griswold that was dimly silhouetted against the window of my hospital room. Once Dr. Moran had exited to continue his rounds, that malignant shadow moved from the window and approached my bed. It bent over me, and I felt Griswold's foul, rasping breath beside my ear. With exaggerated urgency, he stage whispered his fiendish proposition. My mind remained somewhat clouded, and I found that I was unable to speak, yet I dimly understood his proposition, which followed in essence these particulars. First, that my situation was a providential gift. He could easily arrange to counterfeit my death, which would cause my financial obligations to be buried with my coffin. Second, that I should sail incognito to Acapulco, where an associate of Griswold's named Reynolds would supply me with lodgings, money, and a positive supply of drink and female companionship, and a manservant. My sole task would be to resume my writing in secret. Third, as my literary executor, Griswold would use the occasion of my supposed death to lionize my memory, releasing new compendia of my poems and a sympathetic biography. Once my reputation became sufficiently elevated, he would be in a position to release newly discovered works that I would in fact have written in Acapulco. The proceeds from their publication would cover Griswold's outlays on my behalf, and permit me to continue enjoying a comfortable expatriate life free from my debts and my detractors. How I could ever have presumed that scheme to be even remotely sane, I attribute to my delirious state. But agree to it I did, and on the night of October 7th, I was covered with a sheet and carried out of the hospital on a stiff litter. It was left to Dr. Moran to disclose and particularize my supposed death, a task, I would learn later, he performed incompetently. My litter was roughly loaded into a hearse drawn by 2 decrepit horses. I lay alone in the cold, dark coach, jostled wildly as some unseen teamster drove his horses along Baltimore's muddy streets. After perhaps half an hour, the hearse stopped and the doors were opened. An exceedingly thin rogue with a threadbare peacoat and a greasy bowler wordlessly ordered me out. We were at the wharves, where lanterns from sailor dens illuminated several small and large craft moored alongside. The rogue unceremoniously pressed a small package into my hands and pointed his bony finger in the direction of a 2-masted Baltimore clipper. She was the Patrick McGinty, one of the first clippers to be pressed into the service of the California Gold Rush. I hesitated, immobilized by 1,000 questions and with my resolve weakening as the salty night air cleared my head. But my voiceless conductor turned on his heel, and soon he was rattling away with the hearse. Lacking any viable alternatives, I reluctantly made my way along the slippery dock toward the Patrick McGinty. In the package given to me by the hearse's teamster, I found several wafers of hardtack and a one-way ticket to Acapulco. I handed the ticket to the ship's clerk at the bottom of the gangway. Griswold and I had agreed that I would travel as E.A. Perry, the pseudonym I had employed years earlier when I enlisted in the Army as an underage recruit. Here we'll skip over a few paragraphs describing the journey, and we arrive in Acapulco. As I struggled to regain my legs on the town wharf, I was met by a stout Mexican with a metal eye patch who laconically inquired of me, "Senor Perry?" I nodded and bombarded him with a torrent of questions about the possibility of getting a decent meal, the availability of a change of clothing, the location of my lodgings, and other essential matters. The Mexican smiled and nodded, but evidently spoke not a word of English. He ushered me to a grimy palapa, where a generous beaker of rum and some fatty meat were provided. For the next hour, my glass was repeatedly filled as I consumed my rude repast, while a lone musician played his guitar poorly. By degrees, my humor passed from confusion to relief at having arrived at Griswold's intended destination, to biliousness from the drink. Presently, my cyclopean chaperone reappeared and led me out of the squalid cantina. "Please tell me where we're going," I bootlessly demanded of the smiling, uncomprehending fellow. Then I noticed that his eye had focused behind me, and as I turned my head to follow his demi gaze, I felt the sharp blow of a blackjack against the side of my skull. I reeled and stumbled and caught another blow, this time squarely against my left shoulder. Through the homicidal violence, I recalled only the face of the Mexican, no longer smiling, but bored, even impatient. I prepared for a third blow from my unseen assailant, resigning myself to my fate, when I heard a single gunshot followed by a body collapsing next to me. "You Americanos," sighed a tall Mexican with immaculate black hair and crisply uniformed in a dark blue frock coat and tall black boots, clearly bemused by the scene that had just transpired. He was striding deliberately toward me, and his companion, who appeared to be a young soldier, stood at attention holding the Baker rifle he had just used to dispatch my assailant. "Allow me to introduce you to the late Senor Reynolds," continued the sanguinary Good Samaritan, gesturing at the motionless body that lay at my feet. "I estimate he is responsible for at least 2 other murders, possibly more, but we have had no definite proof until now." He flashed a smile that was adorned by several gold teeth. After an awkward pause, he continued, "Welcome to Acapulco. I am Pedro Romero Pacheco de Santa Maria, the Jefe de Policía." And that's where we're going to stop. I thank you for listening. I encourage you to pick up your own copy of Poe's Last Lament and see how it all turns out.
Merry Christmas, Poe fans. I am going to be reading two of my poems, both of them placed in the Poe Like It Poe contest. The first one that I'm going to read is the Guest of Honor, and it was an honorable mention in last year's Poe Like It Poe contest. The Guest of Honor. A plague bleeds crimson through pores from a kingdom of subjects forgotten, and their prince, whose suffering he ignores, is safeguarded by the title he has begotten. Inside an abbey he steals himself away, with 1,000 of his courtiers in all, sealed behind doors of a party in full sway, locked in the delights of a masquerade ball. They make merry amongst the colorful sweets, but behind the masks they cower, laughing nervously with skipped heartbeats when the clock chimes eerily every hour. Wary of the room with windows blood red, shrouded in black velvet tapestries, soft with the ease that living becomes dead, they evade thoughts of those travesties. They dance until the clock strikes midnight, spy an unknown guest and fall silent, scandalously dressed to give them a fright, a spectacle that turns the prince violent. Seize and unmask, he hollers his commands to those frozen with a growing sense of doom. He chases the figure who ignores his demands, following it to the edge of the black room. When it whirls on him, he falls to the floor. The crowd throws itself at the uninvited guest. Outraged for the prince, who was no more, they scream like sins that need be confessed. Beneath the disguise, they find nothing there, as fear and disease swallow their breath, and together they bleed rivers of despair, honoring the presence of the Red Death. And the next poem placed second this year in the Poe Like It Poe contest, and this one's called The Lake Remembers. My broken spirit stirs with an echo from a woeful woman's eternal heartache. Hers is the mirror to my melancholia that leads me to the pier of a lone lake. My sad sighs break the eerie silence and carry on an unnatural breeze, a ghostly call on a line of shared sorrow across a chasm of skin and centuries. She takes shape from a thick forlorn fog that gathers like abandoned bridal lace, pulled together by her unhappy ending, still mournfully written on her face. The moon lends just enough light to illuminate her gown torn at its seams, and the ghastly bruise circling her neck from when her lover broke more than her dreams. Lies made of matrimonial promises, and the innocence only first love could know, anchors her heart to the murky lake bed where she sank into an endless sleep long ago. Though alive, I'm lost in terrible depths, a darkness connecting me to a world unseen, and the phantom pain of love's betrayal is a nightmare we are both trapped between. But I refuse to yield to this torment and cling to the breath that sets us apart, as two wounded women forever haunted by the ghost of a broken heart. Thank you for listening.
Hi, this is A.A. Rubin. I hope you're all having a wonderful holiday season. This is my poem, A Most Unhappy Elf. I do not feel quite like myself. My legs too long, my elbows bumped. Each winter I am sorely thumped. This must be rotten for my health. Though I am stuck here on my shelf, I long to run through forest fair, to loose my arrows in the air. I am a most unhappy elf. Though it be rotten for my health, I stay and watch the children play, to see if they've been good or nay, from my perch upon the shelf. I jump in darkness from my shelf, at night I'm free to move about. As long as I don't ever shout, I'm free to be much more myself. As long as I return myself before the sunrise starts to glow, frozen in a new tableau like a wooden store-bought elf. At night I slip down from my shelf and point my arrows at their beds. For if I'd shoot their pretty heads, from my curse I'd free myself. This must be rotten for my health, as much as I may plot and scheme. My fantasy is but a dream, throughout my day upon the shelf. For though I am an unhappy elf, my conscience cannot murder bear, and so this night I must forbear, and slink back up upon my shelf. I am a most unhappy elf, for thus my urge to kill is quelled, and I must remain here in this hell, in my spot upon the shelf, until I'm put back in the dark, where till next year my box is parked. This must be rotten for my health. I am a most unhappy elf. Thank you for listening. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season.
The Treehouse by Carmen Bouldin. As I drove home for Christmas from school, I began daydreaming of things I used to do when I was a child. I hadn't thought about being a kid in a long time. I guess I was being nostalgic or something. Memories started flooding back like the heavy rain. The tree house next door. I had thought it in my wandering mind. I had totally forgotten about that. I wonder if it is still there. Surely not after all these years. Oh, and how could I forget my friend Carrie? We used to have so much fun in that treehouse. It was like our own little escape from the real world into our own little fantasy land. I wonder where she is today. I remember now that she moved when we were only about 8 years old. I will have to ask Mom if she might have saved a forwarding address, or maybe I can Google her and get lucky enough to find her. Maybe she will even remember me. As I arrived in my parents' driveway, I looked over at the baker's place and saw the beautiful overshadowing maple tree, remembering its gold leaves shining like teardrops of sun. Now winter, the branches were bare, looking like a menacing monster in a horror movie. That tree seemed so much larger when I was a young girl. Within the middle of the tree stood a few boards still hanging on to the fantasy of yesteryears from my innocent childhood. I walked in and hugged my mother. Dad had gone out to play golf. We started talking about school stuff and last-minute shopping plans for Christmas Eve, distracting my mind from asking her about my old friend Carrie. Christmas Day came and went, with happily eating too much as we all felt sleepy and lounged around all day like couch potatoes. As I lay on the couch, I dreamt again of the treehouse days and of Carrie. I would always climb up each board one by one like it was the first time I had ever been up the treehouse. She would always be there waiting to play. We would play silly games and make up fantastic stories that no one would ever believe. These were some of the happiest moments of my childhood. Then, one day, I went up there and Carrie was not there. For the rest of the week, day after day, she was not there, and I kind of figured that she moved. I eventually became interested in other things and found new friends and kind of forgot about her. When I woke up, I went to talk to my mother since it was fresh on my mind. Mom, remember that when I was about 8 years old and I used to play in the treehouse next door? I asked. Yes, I always wondered what you did up there, and I also worried about the safety of the thing, she replied. I used to play with a girl named Carrie that lived next door, and one day when I went up to see her in the treehouse, she wasn't there, and she never came back again after that day. I was really disappointed, and I guessed that she had moved. I guess being a kid, I never thought to ask you back then, I explained. What did you say her name was? She asked me, puzzled. Carrie. Are you sure? It had to be another name like Mary or something, and maybe you were confused about where she lived because the Bakers never moved. They are still next door, she tried to say. No, it was Carrie, and she lived next door, I said fervently. Honey, it could not have been Carrie Baker. Carrie Baker fell out of that treehouse when she was 8 years old and died from a broken neck. The whole thing was an accident, even though she was pushed. That happened 10 years before you were born, she explained. I don't believe it. She was there. I know she was there, I screamed. Maybe you were just confused, or since you were so young, you might be thinking of something else and have a confused memory. You might have even overheard the story and confused it with something else, she said reassuringly. I don't know, I mumbled. After pondering this disturbing thought for several hours, I figured that I must go and talk to Mrs. Baker about her daughter and see if I could look at some of her pictures. I walked next door, and Mrs. Baker was very happy to see me. I haven't seen you in years, she said excitedly. Well, I just have been kind of nostalgic lately and thought about seeing everyone, I replied. Was your Christmas nice? She asked. Yes, thank you, it was. Mrs. Baker, I need to ask you something, but I am not sure how to do it. I was talking to my mother about the treehouse out back, and I said as she interrupted me, Oh, that old thing! We should have torn it down years ago after the accident. It was truly safe, just kids being kids, but it is a constant reminder of my Carrie, and I truly can't let it go. She loved it so. I think she would have slept up there every night if I would have let her. Your mother told you about her accident, didn't she? I kind of figured that she did, so you would be extra careful when you used to go up there as a child. She just told me today. Kind of weird, I know, but we were talking about it, and I guess I asked her about it, and the story came out. I am so sorry for your loss. I had no idea. I'm sure she is at peace. I replied, I hope so. She was my baby, she said mournfully. As I walked back home, I couldn't believe it. Carrie Baker was a ghost when I knew her. My life would never be the same again.
Okay, this is the video that I am doing that is a Christmas situation with Poe, sort of. And I apologize that this is backwards. This book is called The Scary Book of Christmas Lore. And I happened to see this a couple of years ago and ordered it, and it's really quite something. I would really recommend that you get a copy of this and read the different things that are in here talking about Christmas lore, scary things like Krampus and different things like that. There's a lot of people that don't like the situation of Krampus, but I always thought it was sort of cool and interesting. So anyway, this is my video for December, making a connection with Poe, and I'm going to be sharing with you a couple of these stories. And it says on here, Scary Book of Christmas Lore. Forget about Jingle Bells and jolly old St. Nick. 50 terrifying Yuletide tales from around the world. All right. Poe's father had an Irish background. There are no Irish stories in this book. Kind of surprised. But his mother was English. So I'm going to be sharing with you a selection that's in this book that has to do with the English. I have to find it here. Okay. England. Victorian Christmas ghost stories. Of course, we all know Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, the classic tale of the miser Scrooge and his redemption after 3 ghosts visit him. Remind him of his past, show him the suffering all around him, and then reveal to him what will happen if he doesn't change his ways. It's one of the most famous and best-loved books in the English-speaking world and beyond, a classic that is read and enjoyed every year. But what many people don't know is that the Christmas ghost story was a staple of late Victorian holiday tales, and people loved to read and listen to scary stories of ghosts and hauntings set during the chilliest days of the year. The cold weather, the gloomy fog, the bare trees, the snow-covered ground, all of these made for fertile imagery for tales of spooks and delight. And as we've seen, the season seems to bring out the most terrifying tales in many lands. Dickens himself edited magazines such as household words and all the year round, and the Christmas editions of these publications almost always included ghost stories contributed by various authors. He stopped work on these in the late 1860s and left behind the idea of ghostly stories. And to this day, many people share ghostly stories on Christmas Eve. He once wrote that he feared I had murdered a Christmas number years ago. Perhaps I did, and its ghost perpetually haunted me. But by then, the idea had taken hold with readers who were eager for more. Authors such as Walter Scott, Elizabeth Gaskell, and Arthur Conan Doyle all contributed to the demand with a flair for the dramatic. Purple prose galore and more than a few frights. Consider excerpts like the one from Ada Burrison's The Ghost's Summons. Suddenly I aroused with a start and as ghostly a thrill of horror as ever I remember to have felt in my life. Something what, I knew not, and seemed near, something nameless, but unutterably awful. This passage calls to mind the later works of H.P. Lovecraft and his descriptions of unspeakable cosmic horror, and yet it is firmly set at Christmas time. Or how about this one, From Horror, a True Tale by John Berwick Harwood. In the sickly light I saw it lying on the bed, with its grim head on the pillow. A man, or was it a corpse arisen from an unhallowed grave and awaiting the demon that animated it? The humor writer Jerome K. Jerome wrote about the popularity of ghoulish seasonal tales in his book from 1891, Told After Supper. Nothing satisfies us on Christmas Eve but to hear each other tell authentic anecdotes about specters. It is a genial, festive season, and we love to muse upon graves and dead bodies and murders and blood. Well, all right then. These stories are not what we might expect to go along with our eggnog and Christmas cookies, but they were most definitely a popular part of the Victorian holiday celebrations. We might think such tales have more place at Halloween, and that's because that is the exact shift that occurred. By the early 20th century, interest in Christmas ghosts was waning, except for Dickens' novel, while in America, Halloween was becoming the time when all things spooky would be celebrated, thanks in part to Irish and Scottish immigrants, who'd had a long tradition of recognizing late October spirits and thin veils between the worlds. But that's another tale for another time. So that's about Victorian Christmas ghost stories. The other thing that I'm going to share with you is something to do with the black cat from Poe, of course. And this comes from Iceland. Jolactorium, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, the Yuletide cat story from Iceland. The idea of a Yule cat might seem appealing at first, a soft, cuddly little feline in front to warm one on a chilly evening, and perhaps curl up in front of a cozy fire, purring in content. Or maybe he brings presents to good children like so many other fantastical beings out there. But oh no, definitely not. The Jokotium of Iceland is terrifying, but for what might seem really mundane reasons. First of all, this is no mere house cat. The Yule cat is enormous in size and lies in wait in the dark to exact revenge on hapless children. What is their crime? Their clothing. Yes, you see, an old folk custom in Iceland was that children who did all of their chores would receive new clothes for Christmas. Now, most children these days cringe at the thought of Christmas clothing. They dread receiving either socks and underwear, oh, what a shudder, or some horrible holiday sweater that they will be forced to wear, at the next family gathering while shivering up in embarrassment. But for children living in the harsh and cold climate of Iceland, new winter clothing would have been most welcome, and they were expected to wear new clothing on Christmas night. Why? Because the Yule Cat would come and check up on them. Yes, this gigantic feline would creep into every farm and village on Christmas night and peer into each window to see what the children were wearing. If they'd been good, they would be adorned in their fabulous new Christmas digs, or have them at hand at least to show off. But if the children had been bad, for example, they hadn't done all their chores and didn't have at least one new item of clothing, the cat would do two things. First, the cat would eat whatever dinner was made for them, but going hungry was the least of their worries, for next he would drag the naughty children out of the homes and eat them as his main course. Written legends of the Yule Black Cat only date back to the 19th century, but the tradition is probably much older than that. The Norse god Fridra was said to ride in a chariot drawn by the two cats, and a number of other things could shape-shift at will. So it's possible that belief in the monstrous cat originated in pagan times. But it might just as easily have been an invention of worn-out parents who needed the children to pull their own weight around the house. In addition, it seems to have become a tradition, so that those who were better off would be mindful of those who were not. The poor might need the charity of some new, or at least new to them, clothing to stave off the dreadful fate of being snapped up by the ravenous monster cat lurking in the snowy wilds outside their dwellings. If you could avoid seeing or getting eaten, you were probably going to have a good year. So that is the Black Cat, or the Yule Cat, from Iceland. And here he is, looking through the window. Merry Christmas.
I'm Cassondra Windwalker. In the world of horror, you may know me from Ghost Girls and Rabbits, Idle Hands, What Hides in the Cupboards, or Hold My Place. But I like to wander around quite a bit, so you may also have encountered me elsewhere. I'd like to thank Carmen and Jeanie so much for inviting me to be a part of these Poeside Chats. I'll be reading my original story, The Lady in the Lake. We are all haunted. Some of us are stronger than our ghosts, and some of us are not. I wrestle every day with spirits that only my eye sees, but I have watched while another slipped beneath the waters of a lake whose depth could never be sounded. My voice to her was as the wind, my hand that would have helped only a shadow. We are all haunted. I came back to the shore today. I have not returned since she left, but I knew that I would see her. Today is the memorial service. The minister's voice drones on, but I cannot hear what he says. My eyes search the faces of those around me. I'm not here for comfort or for platitudes. I've almost despaired when I finally see her drifting at the edge of the crowd, her hair still damp, as if she's just been pulled from the water, her gaze as dark and melancholy as it has always been. Even now, I bite my lip against the cry of terror that strains from my lungs. Love and madness are not so far removed. Desperately, I try to meet her eyes, but her gaze winnows right through me. So many times before, I've lost myself in the dark pools of her eyes, in the sadness always lingering there, but now I claw at the edges of my own consciousness as I fight to find some way through the black emptiness I see in her now. It had been the same that night. Was it just 2 nights ago? But now she is truly lost to me, her feet firmly planted on the other side of some unseen gulf. Frenetic trembling shakes my limbs. I feel the cold and wet swallowing me up again as it did that night. Lungs burning, I fight the rising panic as she stands there silently, her unseeing eyes fixed on my face. Terror and panic, blind animal panic, burned in her face that night, haloed by the eerie green light of headlamps shining through the murky water of the lake. My memories of those brief seconds of awful, crushing pain and fear are blurred, but I can't forget the ghastly look in those eyes. It was the desperate expression of a creature who is doomed to die, yet in those final moments of life cannot let go, cannot surrender to death with peace. She fought for her life. With a wild frenzy that acknowledged no despair, she clawed at the seatbelt, she wrestled with the icy waters of the lake, and even in the madness of abject fear, shoved herself out of my arms as I tried to hold on to her. And now here am I, and there is she, separated in death, as I would never have allowed us to be separated in life. I shake my head, remembering what she'd tried to tell me that night in the car, on the rocks overlooking the lake. She struggled with the words, but it had been the pity and apprehension that I read in her face that revealed the whole truth to me. Liesel, my beautiful, melancholy Liesel, imagined she had found happiness with someone else. I wasn't angry with her. How could I be? Her voice had been hesitant and low. I listened attentively, my larger hand on her trembling one. She hated hurting me, she said, but I knew she was really hurting herself. This other man, this stranger, only seemed to promise happiness. I alone knew the depths of her soul, the dark, lonely places where demons lurked, the grim and wrathful dreams that racked her nights, the aching, lovely heart so fragile it had to be hidden away from the world. She was turning her back on her true self, on her destiny, because this man offered her the chance to deny all that we shared. I couldn't let her do that. She needed me. Do you think, will you ever be able to forgive me? She asked, her voice breaking, tears in her eyes. The anguish deep inside was suffocating me, I remember, rising up until I could hardly breathe. But I forced a stiff smile and gently kissed her cold, salty lips. There's nothing I won't do for you, Liesel, I said. I love you, always. You know that. So I quietly put the car in drive and hit the accelerator, my hand still on hers. She hardly had time to scream. I was glad. I didn't want her to be afraid. But I hadn't anticipated how the body's desire for survival would surge so powerfully once the frigid waters of the lake began to fill the car, to fill the lungs. The memorial crowd begins to disperse now. People wander away from the shore in little bunches, some murmuring in anxious tones, some sobbing quietly, some simply staring with an expression of quiet shock fixed on their faces. But Liesel lingers still, drifting soundlessly toward a rowboat would-be rescuers had left tied up at the rundown dock. I murmur her name. Liesel. She stares over the water as if she sees me there. I watch as the rowboat moves across the choppy surface of the lake, bobbing hesitantly in the waves. It moves slowly, almost painfully, until it stops near the base of the cliff. The car, the body, is still down there. The lake is perilously deep. I doubt if the authorities will ever recover them. This time, it's not the sickly light of headlamps and watery death, but the blazing glory of the sun that frames her sweet face as she leans over the water to gaze into the ungiving murkiness of the lake. She looks so warm, so alive, yet her very presence here betrays the inevitability of her fate. She screams when she sees my face. Somehow, she's in my arms. I don't know if in her horror she somehow capsized the boat, or if she fainted for a moment, but she comes to me like an angel through the cold, dark waters. Almost immediately, she begins to struggle, her eyes wide with a ghastly, horrible, staring expression, her heart beating like a wild baby rabbit's just before it dies, a fear in your hand. I grip her tightly, as I could not that night in the car when my legs had been trapped beneath the dashboard, my mouth filling with water, my head swimming with pain. No, I lost my grip on her then, when she had somehow inexplicably abandoned me there to fight for the life which could never have brought her what she needed. But now I wrap myself tightly around her. Pulling her deeper and deeper into the dark, I stroke her face and whisper in her hair as she twists madly back and forth. Don't be afraid, Liesel, I tell her. Don't be afraid. Suddenly she calms, her movements growing more and more sluggish, her eyes glazing. I kiss her flaccid lips, though I barely feel them. This time there was no anxious lover on the shore watching the car on the cliff, no besotted fool to leap into the water and pull my angel from my grasp. Her body sags and sinks, its heavy, superfluous form slipping through me to vanish into the muddy depths below. I wonder if anyone even notices, even realizes she's come to rejoin me at last. But she has not come. I wait and wait, since I felt her spirit-shedded skin, felt that light shine through me for a brief moment there in the cold, dark depths, but she has not come. I search for her in every crevice, every treacherous cavern of this damned watery prison, but she is not here. She does not stand at the shore. I do not see her spirit on the cliffs. I no longer hear her voice lilting to me on the wind. I am alone. And though she is not with me still, she haunts me. Not the beautiful angel that I had loved, no. The face that haunts me now is the face of a monster. Its ghoulish staring eyes accusing me relentlessly, its slack lips fallen in an awful grimace, its pale skin torn by the fishes. I cannot feel the sun or the wind or the water, but always against my chest there beats the wild, dying staccato of her heart. Her flailing arms brush me in these depths and make me start with fear. There is no escape from this hell, from the awesome terror and dread that dogs me through the days that do not warm me and the nights that do not bring me dreams. I long for her, yet there is no evil I fear more than that I should ever see her again. Yes, we are all haunted. You may think I am the ghost that haunts this lake, but the lake haunts me. Mine is not the spirit that cries against the night cries against me, the stars casting down upon the waves the reflection of my angel's eyes, the moon casting the shadows of my bloody hands into sharp reliefs upon the sandy shores. I am the specter that I fear, and the demons that assail me I can never conquer. The lake has swallowed me up, yet I cannot lose myself.
Jimmy Dixon was stuck. He had felt stuck for some time, the last few years anyway. He met Sally at that insurance trade show. He was at the hotel bar with a couple other guys from his company, but then he looked over his shoulder to see this cute girl take over her shift at the front desk. The second thing he noticed about her were her eyes when, a little inebriated, he walked up to the desk and started the conversation, which ended in an invitation to meet him for drinks after her shift. The rest is the past 6 years of history as her husband. And within the first 2 years, he had screwed up. The first of a long list of screw-ups, and he was trying to make it right. But now, he was literally stuck in his home's chimney. He'd gone up to the roof a week before when Sally had taken Sandy, their now 4-year-old daughter, to his grandparents for an overnight. The house was old. His grandparents had given it to him upon his marriage, they moving to a smaller, more manageable condo. He knew the chimney was wide, old-fashioned, and impractical for modern heating. They had only lit it on special occasions, like Christmas. He had lowered himself into the chimney to his hips, feeling it out, looking down, and seeing metal braces every couple feet, and plenty of room for him, and felt, yes, making Christmas special for Sandy and, of course, Sally would help make amends. This would work. And there was much to make amends for. His feelings for Sally started with infatuation and mutual attraction and grew from there, but maybe not enough. 13 months after the wedding, Sally was pregnant, and 2 months later, bedtime was just for sleeping. Then he gave Caroline from work a ride home a month later, not expecting her to invite him in for coffee, and not expecting him to stay longer for more than coffee. Sally suspected, and Jimmy stopped further dalliance soon thereafter, but it was a couple months ago when she was trying to get him to change positions at the insurance company that things got really bad. Jimmy had heard this speech too many times. He was trying to prevent fraud, he said. It wasn't that the company was really trying to deny someone's claim, he said, but she persisted. Jimmy tried to tell himself it was the whiskey he'd been drinking that evening, another topic of intense conversation between them, but he lashed out, physically. Those were the two most egregious things against Jimmy as regards his relationship with Sally, but there was a list of things, a too long list. He had checked it more than twice in the past few years. He knew Sally also kept the list in her mind and heart, and in October when he slapped her hard, something harder came between them, and he was afraid of losing her and Sandy. It may have been the liquid courage that had impaired his judgment, or just stupidity, he was telling himself now, but not accounting for the bulk of both the Santa costume and a velvet bag containing an expensive toy for Sandy and a necklace for Sally that cost his complete Christmas bonus. These had caused issues mere feet down the chimney shaft. He had pictured it multiple times in the past month. He had waited about an hour until they were due back from listening to the local amateur orchestra perform carols at their church. He'd get changed quickly, fetch the ladder from the shed, then sit on the roof, and when he saw the car, he'd start down the chimney. He'd rest the pleather boots of the outfit on the braces inside the shaft, then kind of hop down in controlled increments until his boots hit the bottom of the fireplace with the ho 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 when he realized they were both in the living room. He could just see their faces, smiling faces, the smiling faces of his daughter and, most importantly, his wife. And things would start to get better because he'd make Christmas so special for them both. He'd progressed only a couple yards when his feet slipped. Now his upper body was lower than it should be, and his knees were against his chest, his back hard against the flue wall. One of the metal brackets was digging into his back, and now he was stuck. He had tried multiple times to reach up and try to grab the bricks or the bracket above him so he could get upright again, but he couldn't reach, and his legs were locked in position. The beard was pushed up over his nose and mouth, and he was getting more aware of the soot and smell by the minute. He had also ignored the weather forecast that called for a slight chance of snow that night, the temperature getting just cold enough by 8 o'clock for a possible dusting. But he had made his mind up about this, and a dusting became more than that, and snow began to drift down, then melt almost immediately when it reached the red fleece of his Santa costume. He'd shout out when he heard the car pull up and the front door open. Of course she would hear him, and of course she would call the fire department or whoever deals with this sort of thing, and they'd get him out, and then things would be okay and hopefully better than they had been. Then the loose coat betrayed him. His torso slipped with a jerk, and his knees were now right in front of his face, and his chest was crushed against his thighs, and now it was more than the beard that was impeding his breathing. His diaphragm was restricted, and he was gasping for air, opening his mouth like a fish on land. Soon enough, though, he heard the door open, and then voices. As he tried to cry out, only able to manage hoarse whispers instead of what he needed in his distress, his face damp with sweat, back in agony, Jimmy Dixon realized there was something wrong with the voices. One was Sally's, but the other wasn't Sandy. It was a man's voice. "Listen, Sal," the male voice said, "if you... I just realized it was a year ago tonight. We really shouldn't." Jimmy recognized it. Mark, from underwriting. Mark, who was there at the bar 7 years ago. No, 6 years ago. Not 7. Why did he think 7? No, it's fine. I won't this. You know we weren't close by then," she replied with a giggle. "You most of all, and Sandy spending all night with his grandparents so they can give her a Christmas she deserves, they said." Sally chuckled again. They still blame me, of course. Jimmy could do no wrong. Again, Jimmy thought, talking as if he was in the past. 7 years? A year ago tonight? Then the spell was broken, and he remembered. He and Sally had fought that night. She wanted him to go with them to the performance, but she didn't want to drive in case it did snow. He had refused because he had his special Christmas miracle plan. Sally had lost control on the way back. A minor accident, but Sandy had hurt her head and so had to go to the ER. Not for long. Just long enough for no one to be there to hear Jimmy croak for help. No one wondering where he was. He was in front of the TV, Sally knew, just not answering his phone. It was almost midnight before Sally came home with his daughter, her head bandaged. Sally lit a fire first thing for Sandy because of the snow and it being Christmas Eve, assuming Jimmy had gone to bed. She stoked the flames, but they smoldered more than burned, and soon smoke wafted into the living room because the chimney shaft was blocked with something. The rest, Jimmy Dixon realized, was indeed history. The events of a year ago. For some reason he had returned to relive it. No, that wasn't the right word. Relive. Would he be doomed to come back each year? Was this also part of his punishment? He had a year of waiting to find out. For now, he had to return. Return to the fireplace.
Hello, I am Dr. Jeff Thompson of Tennessee State University and Nashville State Community College. I would like to share with you one of my favorite scary poems, The Earl King, by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, 1749 to 1832. In this poem, you will hear 4 different speakers: the narrator, the father riding his horse, the young son whom the father is carrying, and the Earl King, the grim reaper, Death. Who rides so late in a night so wild? A father is riding with his child. He clasps the boy close in his arm. He holds him tightly. He keeps him warm. My son, you are trembling. What do you fear? Look, father, the Earl King, he's coming near, with his crown and his shroud. Yes, that is he. My son, it's only the mist you see. Oh, lovely child, oh, come with me. Such games we'll play, so glad we'll be. Such flowers to pick, such sights to behold. My mother will make you clothes of gold. Oh, father, my father, did you not hear the Earl King whispering in my ear? Lie still, my child, lie quietly. It's only the wind in the leaves of the tree. Dear boy, if you will come away, my daughters will wait on you every day. They'll give you the prettiest presents to keep. They'll dance when you wake, and they'll sing you asleep. My father, do you not see the Earl King's pale daughters waiting for me? My son, I see what you say. The willow is waving its branches of gray. I love you, so come without fear or remorse. And if you're not willing, I'll take you by force. My father, tighten your hold. The Earl King has caught me. His fingers are cold. The father shudders. He spurs on his steed. He carries the child with desperate speed. He reaches the courtyard and looks down with dread. There in his arms, the boy lies dead. One of my favorite poems by Edgar Allan Poe, 1809 to 1849, is one of his last, Annabel Lee, a poem that I call horribly romantic. I wonder if the narrator is reliable or unreliable. It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea, but we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee, with a love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that, long ago in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, and of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea, can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee, and the stars never rise but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so, all the night-tide I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. Have you read the beautiful poetry of Christina Rossetti, 1830 to 1894? In this somber poem called Song, when I say haply, I am not saying the word happily, I am saying haply, which means perhaps or maybe. When I am dead, my dearest, sing no sad songs for me. Plant thou no roses at my head, nor shady cypress tree. Be the green grass above me with showers and dewdrops wet. And if thou wilt, remember, and if thou wilt, forget. I shall not see the shadows, I shall not feel the rain, I shall not hear the nightingale sing on as if in pain. And dreaming through the twilight that doth not rise nor set, haply I may remember, and haply may forget. Have you read the wonderful poetry of Vic Krume, 1913 to 1979? You may have when you were younger. Vic Krume is actually Victoria Krume, and here is her atmospheric poem, The Haunted House. Not a window was broken, and the paint wasn't peeling. Not a porch step sagged, yet there was a feeling that beyond the door and into the hall, this was the house of no one at all. No one who breathed, nor laughed, nor ate, nor said, I love, nor said, I hate. Yet something walked along the stair, something that was and wasn't there. And that is why weeds on the path grow high, and even the moon races fearfully by. For something walks along the stair, something that is and isn't there.